If you've been sleeping on lights from NiceFoto simply because of their admittedly generic sounding brand name, it's time to wake up. This is the LV series from NiceFoto featuring daylight and bicolor versions at 150, 200, 300, and 600 watts. I'm using the 150 watt bicolor light in a 42-inch softbox to film this video at only 2% brightness, so I can only imagine how bright the 600 watt daylight only version gets. But my favorite thing about them has to be their detachable remote control system. There's some really cool details I want to show you about that, but first let's look at the basics. These lights fall somewhere in between other budget and professional quality lights out there, but the build quality definitely leans more towards the professional side. The 150 and 200 watt lights have a metal body with heavy-duty plastic front and back ends. The mounting yokes and receivers are also metal, while the tightening knob is expectedly plastic. The angle adjustments on the LV series have covers on them, so although you can't see it, they do have teeth that allow them to lock securely into place without much effort. The 300 and 600 watt lights do have differences apart from their overall size and shape, with a metal front end and a collapsible back handle. It too is metal, but with a rubberized grip, and it quickly flips up and locks into place if you need a little extra something to grab onto. One thing that worried me at first glance was the U-bracket on the bigger models. On the surface, they look like they're plastic, which wouldn't really make sense for bigger and heavier lights. The full story is that they have a metal core with a plastic outer shell just to make them more comfortable to grab while you're working with them, and that's not something I've ever seen before, but I thought it was a nice touch. One other thing to mention is that the actual LED chip is flush with the front of the housing on these lights, so it's less likely that you're going to damage the heatsink or the LED itself. All of the lights in the LV series come with only the light itself, a single power cable, and a stock reflector. So the trade-off for lighter, cheaper, and more compact lights like these is that you don't get things like a carrying case or native battery support. And that's not really a pro or a con because it totally depends on your use case or workflow. If you plan to use these in a studio or you run cables from a generator or a portable power station to all your lights on set, it's a total non-issue. And then you're not having to deal with all kinds of other extra accessories like a battery box for every single light that you're using. Before I get into some more of the technical specs, let's take a look at the control box that I mentioned in the beginning of the video because I know you're intrigued. At first, the controls look like any other light with a single pressable dial and a couple buttons on the back. You can adjust the brightness in increments of 1%, and on the bicolor lights, the color temperature from 2700 to 6500 Kelvin in increments of just 100. Pressing and holding the dial will black out the light while still allowing you to adjust settings, and then pressing and holding it again will reactivate the light with those new settings. They do have some built-in special effects, but at this point I would call them borderline useless. They aren't really realistic, and they currently only work at 100% brightness. Although I am told a mobile app is in the works, complete with updates to all the special effects. But if you need remote control in the meantime, you arguably get something better because the entire back panel pops off as a wireless remote control. You can set the lights to one of 16 different channels and 5 different groups, so you can control multiple lights from just one location. You need to have the controller attached to the light to set the channel or the group for that light, and then once you detach it, you set the channel or group you want to control, and you can change things from there. So to be extra clear, you have to have the remote control detached from the light to control multiple lights at once. There's also a little blue light on the back of the head unit for each light that you can see when the remote is detached. It blinks whenever it's receiving signals from the wireless remote, so it's just a good way to make sure everything is working properly. The screens on the controllers are big and bright, and they have built-in rechargeable batteries. They have wireless contacts so they can charge anytime they're inserted into a powered-on light, but they also have a USB-C port if you'd rather charge them like that instead. I do wish the dials on the remotes were a little bit sturdier than they are in their current plastic form. They aren't bad, they're just not quite as good as the build quality on the rest of the lights. Overall, I really like this system because it's more convenient than having to open a mobile app, especially if you need your phone to do things other than control lights. The fans on the 2 lower powered models are super quiet, and although the fans are slightly louder on the more powerful lights, they are still quieter than most high-powered lights I've tested. I have the bicolor 150 and 300 watt lights and the daylight-only 200 and 600 watt lights, all of which I tested with my Sekonic C800 for brightness and color accuracy. Looking at the bicolor versions set to 3200 Kelvin first, there's really nothing to say because all of the numbers look very good. With the bicolor lights set to 5500 Kelvin, again, everything is pretty much on par with other high-quality LEDs. The R12 values could be a little higher, and the CCT on the LV-3000A specifically is a little farther off of 5500 Kelvin than it could be, but it's very minor and not something I worry about. The only real surprise here is a good one, because these lights are as bright or brighter than most daylight-only lights of the same power while being bicolor. Looking at the daylight LV-2000 and 6000B, there are some quirks, but again in a good way. All the numbers on the LV-6000B are very good, but for some reason the color accuracy of the LV-2000B is on a different level. All the individual R values are in the very high 90s, the tint is exactly 0, and the SSI comes in at 83. That is insanely high considering most good daylight LEDs are between 72 and 75. I'm not sure why this model in particular is so extra, but all of these lights will still work perfectly together, so you can safely mix and match daylight and bicolor versions of any power. And again, the brightness on these two lights is well above average. The 200 watt light essentially outputs what most 300 watt lights I test can do. Overall, I'm really impressed by the brightness and color accuracy of the LV series, so I have no reservations there. The biggest downside to some of these lights and NiceFoto products in general is that they aren't quite as easy to get a hold of as other mainstream brands. Luckily, the 150 and 200 watt lights are available on Amazon for around $165 to $220 depending on which variation you buy. The 300 and 600 watt lights are more of a special order type thing, but you can get them easily on Alibaba because there is no minimum order quantity. I actually requested a quote with any extra shipping and tax just to see what the total cost would be to my door so I could share it with you. The daylight and bicolor LV-3000B and A are $370 and $430 respectively, and the LV-6000B and A are $550 or $650 respectively. Obviously, these lights aren't 100% comparable, but just for comparison's sake, an Aperture 600X costs just under $2,000, so the LV-6000A is about 1/3 the price. So for the deal you can get compared to most 300 and especially 600 watt lights, it might be well worth the wait and a little bit of extra hassle. And keep in mind, NiceFoto isn't a big name in the US, but they have been around and manufacturing photo and video equipment for a really long time, so they are a well-trusted and well-respected brand. With the whole detachable remote situation, I think these are some of the best studio lights you can get for the price, so I have no hesitation recommending them. But what do you think? Leave a comment and let me know how the LV series looks versus the usual alternatives. Links are in the description if you want to check these lights out further, and if you buy anything at all using my links, that's the best way to support this channel without any extra cost to you. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.